We begin with a look at what's shaping up to be a dramatic State of the Union before it even begins. Trump is set to address the nation Tuesday night in the midst of a partial government shutdown, a shutdown spurred by his own administration's disastrous ICE operation in Minneapolis. His approval rating on two issues that carried him back to the White House, immigration and the economy, are underwater. On top of that, he's coming off more bad economic news. First, Trump's own Commerce Department confirmed that fourth quarter GDP growth came in far below expectations at just 1.4%. And then came the constitutional earthquake, and one of the biggest blows to a presidential agenda since the Supreme Court overturned several key provisions of the New Deal. The court struck down most of Trump's tariffs. He responded by calling the justices who ruled against him a, quote, disgrace. And now he's announced he will raise his global tariffs from 10% to 15%. It'll be interesting to see how Trump addresses the justices on Tuesday, assuming they attend his State of the Union address. But it will probably go differently than the last time around. You might remember in 2025, after the court handed Trump a major victory in its presidential immunity ruling the previous year, Trump ended his joint address to Congress with some warm words for Chief Justice Roberts.
Thank you again. Thank you again. Don't forget.
Here's how President Trump responded when asked whether he even wanted the justices to attend his State of the Union address.
Supreme Court justices who ruled against this the policy, striking it down, are they still invited to your State of the Union next week? And will you speak with them?
They are invited, barely. Barely. Three are happily invited. No, they're barely invited. Honestly, I couldn't care less if they come, okay?
Sure, Jan. Joining us now, the former speechwriter and special assistant to former President Joe Biden, Jeff Nussbaum. He's also author of Undelivered, the never-heard speeches that would have rewritten history, and it's a great book.
Very good book.
Very good book.
Oh, thanks.
All right, so Jeff, as a former speechwriter, if you were in the White House now, this day would be a big day. You guys would be going over draft after draft and words and stuff like that. You told us a little story before we came on air that is just perfect for what we might see.
Yeah, right. What normally would be happening may not be what is happening. But when I moved into my office in the White House for President Biden, we moved a desk and realized a bunch of Trump draft speeches had fallen behind it. So I called the archives because that is the law. another one that they made. But as the archives were coming to pick them up, I took a look, and what they had been doing, it provided sort of an excavation window into how they do this. And they were taking transcripts of Trump's previous speeches and then tracking changes on top of them. So they were effectively taking what he had said, or sort of his greatest hits, and then adding greater outrageousness. So that's why we get with Trump speeches greatest hits albums that are then amped up for greater outrage.
Wow.
I don't know if you've told that story.
I have not. This is the first time I've shared it.
It's exclusive.
It is very startling because, that is not how most speechwriters write speeches. They do look at speeches of their boss and say, how do they say that? But usually it's say it differently. Say it in a more interesting way. Who's a bigger audience?
Or here's an idea we want to introduce, or it's an act of co-creation, or here's what your policy advisors think, or here's how we're going to modify and build on. But instead, this is a staff, and I think you see this not just in speeches but elsewhere, where they are chasing their boss. Yeah. And they are seeking to please their boss by offering him something even more incendiary than what he had said before.
You also told us that you did a little analysis of some of Trump's past speeches. What did you find?
Well, Jonathan captured it perfectly in his intro here, which is he said in his last joint address to Congress the phrase, like nothing you've ever seen before, 20 times. So that is sort of the promise, and I don't know that it's a good one. The other thing I will say that he's done in his speeches in States of the Union more than any other president is he uses what are called Skutnik stories. These are when you feature real people. This was something President Reagan first did in 1982, featured a hero who had jumped into the Potomac to save plane crash victims named Lenny Skutnik. And so this is the beginning of heroes in the balcony. Trump, who you would not think is someone who likes to share the spotlight, uses this more than any other president. And I think it's an admission of his unpopularity and the unpopularity of many of his policies, which is that he feels the need to bask in the glow of someone other than himself, someone who did something actually heroic.
I mean, or is it, hey, look at these people, and then they're going to fawn all over me as a result?
Yeah, because he gets the credit for bringing those people.
Absolutely.
And them sitting next to the first lady.
Yeah, it's a way of milking applause as well.
Yeah.
You know, on Sputnik, and having people in the audience, you know, we're going to have a situation where some Democrats will not be there. Other Democrats will be there, and we'll be watching to see whether they act out or act up. And then you're going to have Democrats who are going to be there, and they're going to be there with survivors of Jeffrey Epstein. Talk about how much, as a speechwriter, how much does that play into how you're crafting a speech? The audience, and who might be there and who won't be there, the reactions that might come.
A lot. I mean, you often think about there's several audiences. There's the audience in the room, and then there's the audience as represented by the cameras and television. And so, first of all, these speeches are tricky. They tend to be lists. And so any chance to interact with the audience, to draw emotional power from the audience, that is why presidents choose who they feature, because it allows them to tell a story in the limited time they have to tell a story. I don't know that he's going to spend a lot of time worrying or thinking about anyone else who Democrats might be bringing. That said, this is a president who's so thin-skinned that perhaps he does get triggered by something like that. And so that's something I assume his staff is preparing for.
Yeah, I want to look at some polling that we have from President Trump. This is E1. Nearly half of Americans would describe Trump as corrupt, racist, and cruel. Corrupt, racist, and cruel. 49% say he is corrupt. 47% say he's racist. 46% say he's cruel. That's an Economist and YouGov poll. His overall approval rating in that same poll, 56 disapprove, and the approve is 39%. So when you look at that, right, let's put you in the Trump White House. Good luck. You're in the Trump White House. You're in your old office. You look at that. You see the legal defeat that the president just got on Friday. Do you try to create a speech where the goal is reassurance, redirection, or rallying the base?
All of the above. And first of all, I hope that the only thing I share with Stephen Miller is a hairline. Yes, you try to find the places where you are going to be popular, where you're going to be accepted. And I think one of the things, and I actually wrote a little piece about this earlier this week,
for Notice, right?
Yeah, for Notice, and it's what can he wrap himself in that is widely popular? And really, it's not his 5 years as president. It's 250 years of American history. Right. And I think you're going to see that a little bit in the State of the Union response from Williamsburg, where we are at the semi-quincentennial of the United States. Yeah. And telling a story of the longer arc is more popular and unifying, if he intends to unify, which is an open question or maybe a closed question. Yeah. But it's more popular and more unifying to tell a longer story about America than it is about his actions over the past year.
And then you have to dare the Democrats to fight against 250 years of America. That's it'd be a good tactic if he would use it.
Exactly.
Democrats, Jeff, have decided that they're going to hold some counter-programming outside of the State of the Union response that's traditionally delivered. They're going to hold a rally. What do you make of this? I mean, my instinct, as we had been talking about yesterday, was that I thought every single Democrat should grab an Epstein survivor. There are many of them. And sit there and look the president in the face and watch him make everyone around him, including his own party and his appointed Supreme Court justices, deeply uncomfortable. I mean, why do you think they've decided not to even be in the room? And do you think that's a good decision?
Yeah, we did talk about this a little bit. I think it is not a good decision. And I understand Senator Murphy and others say, why should we provide an audience? Why should we be punching bags? At the same time, I do think it is a little bit of a responsibility to bear witness. Not a lot of Americans sit through full Trump speeches. I've had the misfortune of having to sit through 2 of them in the last couple months.
Just two?
Just two. I
don't feel sorry for you.
Yeah, I know your job is to sit through many more.
Yeah, we need a little more. We need a little more background.
But that's exactly it. It is the same speech, but people don't always hear it until they hear it for the third, fourth, fifth time.
Yeah.
And this is a president who plays checkers. He tells you what his next move is. This is not chess. And so one of those speeches, I listened to him before this decision berate the Supreme Court justices in the room. And if you had heard that, you would know that this is coming. And so to your point, I think that Democrats, as always, like to go their own way a little bit. And I think that's good for messaging. Everyone should try a different message and see what sticks. But in the State of the Union, you have this challenge, and it's a challenge for the response, and it's a challenge for the Democrats, where it is such a bully pulpit, as President Roosevelt said, that you're going to look small by comparison. And the only way to look a little bigger is to be more unified. And Democrats have taken this approach where we're going to protest, and we're going to have some Epstein victims, and thank goodness we're not holding up auction paddles. But when you let 1,000 flowers bloom in this type of environment, you tend to end up with 1,000 dead flowers. And so I think in the room, silent, with some symbolic guests, and then America will watch this, and then you can go out hard and say, you saw this, you saw X, you saw Y, you saw Z, because we know from this polling you shared, Americans don't like it when they see it. So actually bring more attention to what the president is saying, as opposed to drawing attention away from what the president is saying.
You call it a bully pulpit, and I think I
underlying bully.
I can guarantee, yes, because President Trump will emphasize the bully part.
Yes, that's right.
I think he's going to go after the Supreme Court.
Yep.
I would not be surprised if he goes directly at Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. I wouldn't be surprised if he says some really nasty, derogatory, even racist things from the well of the House of Representatives. I just think he's going to use his first State of the Union address, because the one last year was a joint address to Congress, to really lay a marker, lay down a marker. And when a normal president would use the 250th anniversary of this country, this State of the Union address, to deliver a beautiful...
Right, or to put it in slightly more elevated terms.
Metaphors.
We will get a tribute to the factionalism the founders 250 years ago warned us against.
Okay, that's more...
Thank you for saying that.
Clever.
But no, I mean, the Red Lobster analogy works pretty well.
No, it doesn't. Hey, the gross. Very disgusting. Jeff, that's Bob.
Hey, I like Red Lobster.
I love